कहन दिया भी कोई गल नहीं पर जनानियां सीरियस हो जांदियां बस छेती ਆਪਾਂ ਤੇ ਪਈਏ ਕੰਮ 'ਚ ਪੈਣਾ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਤੇ ਛੋਟੇ ਛੋਟੇ ਵਿਆਹ ਠੀਕ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਯਾਰ ਇਹ ਕੁੜੀ ਮੇਰੇ ਬੜੀ ਵਜਰ ਦੀ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਪਈ ਆ ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਵੀ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਵਿਆਹ ਕਰਾ ਲਾ ਭਾਵੇਂ ਕੰਟਰੈਕਟ ਮੈਰਿਜ ਕਰਾ ਲਾ ਤੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਬਾਹਰ ਚਲਾ ਜਾ ਇਹਦੇ ਕੋਲ ਪੀਆਰ ਹੈ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੀ ਇਹਨੇ ਅੱਗੇ ਕੀਤਾ ਆਪਣੀ ਇੱਕ ਸਹੇਲੀ ਨੂੰ ਹਾਲਾਂਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਕਮਿਟਮੈਂਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤੀ ਅਜੇ ਤੱਕ ਨਾ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਅਜੇ ਤੱਕ ਕਿਹਾ ਵੀ ਮੈਂ ਕੁਛ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਨਾ ਕਰਾਉਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਹਨ ਵੀ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਇੰਟਰਸਟ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀ ਇਹਨੇ ਆਪਣੀ ਇੱਕ ਸਹੇਲੀ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕੀਤਾ ਵੀ ਸਾਈਕੋਲੋਜਿਸਟ ਆ ਕੁੜੀ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਇਹਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਵੀ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਸਨੈਪਚੈਟ ਤੇ ਐਡ ਕਰਕੇ ਤੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰੇ ਵੀ ਪਤਾ ਕਰੇ ਵੀ ਮੁੰਡਾ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਦਾ ਠੀਕ ਹੈ ਮੇਰੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੋਈ 2-3 ਦਿਨ ਮਤਲਬ ਪੂਰੀ ਸੈਂਟੀ ਜੀ ਹੋ ਗਈ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਵੀ ਮੁੰਡਾ ਤੇਰੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਠੀਕ ਨਹੀਂਗਾ ਚਲੋ ਠੀਕ ਹੈ ਵੀ ਉਹਨੇ ਜੋ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਉਹ ਰਿਪੋਰਟ ਦੇ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਬਾਅਦ ਉਹ ਸਾਰੀ ਮੇਰੇ ਮਗਰ ਪੈ ਗਈ ਹੁਣ ਫਿਰ ਬਾਅਦ 'ਚ ਮੈਂ ਉਹਦੀਆਂ ਸਕਰੀਨ ਰਿਕਾਰਡਿੰਗਾਂ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਸਨੈਪਚੈਟ ਦੀਆਂ ਦੂਜੇ ਫੋਨ ਤੋਂ ਫਿਰ ਮੈਂ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਚੰਗੀ ਖੱਚ ਕੀਤੀ ਮਾਫੀਆਂ ਮੰਗ ਕੇ ਛੁੱਟੀ ਫਿਰ ਮੈਂ ਕੌਣ ਹਾਂ ਇਹਦੇ ਕੋਲ ਮੇਰੀ ਮਾਤਾ ਦਾ ਨੰਬਰ ਆ ਗਿਆ ਤੇ ਜੀ ਆ ਕੁੜੀ ਨਵ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਇਹਦੇ ਕੋਲ ਮੇਰੀ ਮਾਤਾ ਦਾ ਨੰਬਰ ਆ ਗਿਆ ਗੁਰੂ ਇਹ ਹੁਣ ਮਾਤਾ ਨੂੰ ਫੋਨ ਕਰੀ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ ਵੀ ਮਤਲਬ ਇਹ ਮੇਰਾ ਫੋਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਚੁੱਕਦਾ ਮਾਤਾ ਮੇਰੀ ਮੈਂ ਮਾਤਾ ਦਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਚੁੱਕਣ ਦੇ ਫੋਨ ਔਖਾ ਹੋਇਆ ਪਿਆ ਮੇਰੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਮੈਂ ਤਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਇਹ ਚੀਜ਼ ਤੋਂ ਦੂਰ ਹੀ ਰਹਿਣਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਆਪਾਂ ਅਗਲੇ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਕਹਿ ਦਿੰਦਾ ਵੀ ਠੀਕ ਹੈ ਕੋਈ ਫੇਰ ਖਰਾਬੀ ਕਰਨੀ ਤੇ ਕਰਨ ਲੱਗ ਗਿਆ ਸੀਰੀਅਸ ਵਾਲਾ ਕੰਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਨਾ ਵਾ ਕਰਨਾ ਤੇ ਹੋਰ ਕੋਲ ਲੱਭੋ
So let's try and make sense of some of these conversations and tapes. Joining me on India First is my colleague Sudhir Chaudhary, consulting editor Aaj Tak. Sudhir, these tapes and these conversations clearly show, or at least it indicates, that Amritpal was no holy man.
Absolutely, Gaurav, and today we have got every evidence which will destroy Amritpal Singh forever. And see, I'll tell you about the audio recordings. Overall, we have 12 audio recordings where Amritpal Singh is talking in very obscene language. In first recording, he is commenting on women that they get serious very soon, and he is saying that he is not interested in serious relationships and that it is acceptable for him to have small marriages like illicit affairs. In second recording, he is naming a girl which I don't want to mention here, but he says that the girl has a Canadian PR, he has an affair with her, and the girl is interested in marrying him, but Amritpal is not interested to marry her. Recording number 3, he is again mentioning about some girl and says that this girl was inquiring about him and now he has got involved with this girl. Recording 4, again talking about some girl, he has recordings. Now, this is very important, Gaurav, and our viewers also should listen to it, and especially the people who follow Amritpal and think that he is some Khalistani leader. He has nothing to do with any kind of ideology or any kind of religion. He is a petty criminal, and look at his mindset. He is saying that he has got recordings of a girl on Snapchat video. He is threatening the girl that he would publicize the video, and he is then claiming that the girl started to feel sorry and started apologizing. So this guy is talking to a girl on Snapchat video. Obviously the video is of a very obscene nature, and then he is blackmailing the girl. In next recording, he says about his third affair with some other girl. The name of the girl is also here, but we don't want to mention the name here because it is irrelevant. So now he says that he has stopped talking to that girl, and the girl's mother has started calling this guy Amritpal Singh, and now he has even stopped talking or taking mother's call. He is saying that now he is in trouble as he has many affairs now. In next
and this is when he's already married. And
absolutely, he is married, claims he is happily married and talking to so many girls. Apart from these recordings, as I said that there are 12 recordings, and each recording is about some, every different girl. Now, apart from these recordings, we have also got these the copies of his WhatsApp chats with girls, which I have brought with me. Here are the WhatsApp chats where he's talking to these girls. Again, the language is very objectionable, very obscene. And then I have also got the copy of the chat box, the inbox, where he has an account with the name Sandhu Amrit 10. And then if you look at these the accounts and the conversations, they are all girls. Almost 100% of the people whom he is talking, they are all girls, women from different parts of the world.
And here is a man who is actually, as on date, a fugitive from law, and someone, Sudhir, who was actually trying to leave this country and go and live in Canada.
Absolutely. So now, proof number 2, apart from what he's doing with girls and women all over the world and his own ideology and his mindset. Now, I have got papers about his visa application for Canada, where he is trying to get a PR, and he has applied for a work permit, and this document which I have in my hand is dated Feb 3rd, 2022.
Okay.
Last year.
So last year.
Last year.
February 2022, he wanted to leave this country.
Absolutely. And his documentation is almost done, if we believe these papers. And he is saying that he wants to work there as a driver. He has joined a company. The company has completed all the documentations. Company is giving an undertaking that this guy will come here in Canada and work as a driver. Our viewers should also know that he was in Dubai before coming to Punjab, right. And he again in Dubai also, he was working as a driver.
He was a taxi driver apparently in Dubai.
Absolutely.
And here is a man who was actually trying to foment trouble in India. And we'll track that story very, very closely. Sudhir, for joining me here on India First. Many thanks.
Thank you. Thanks.
I now want to shift focus to our top story. In a virtual tit-for-tat action, India today scaled down security at the British High Commission and at the residence of the British High Commissioner to India. Barricades and sandbags removed, police control room vehicles withdrawn. This ahead of the second planned protest by pro-Khalistan elements outside the Indian High Commission in London. India had also expressed displeasure and summoned the British Deputy High Commissioner after the vandalism and violence in London. This evening, more than 100 British police personnel were deployed in multiple tiers outside the India House. Lavina Tandon gets us more.
Multi-tiered security outside the Indian High Commission in London ahead of the second protest by pro-Khalistani supporters on Wednesday. Barbed wire on the balcony to ensure no protester could come close to the tricolour again. This after violent scenes were witnessed on Sunday with pro-Khalistani elements smashing window panes and attempting to desecrate the tricolour.
As you can see right here, there is a kind of bomb that has come through from the other side. Despite the fact that the protesters are on the other side, there is a kind of bomb kind of a thing. We can't figure out exactly what it is.
India's action did not just stop with the summoning of the British Deputy Commissioner to India. Security barricades, concrete blocks, sandbags and the police control room vehicles were withdrawn from outside the residence of the British High Commissioner in Delhi and the High Commission building.
Here there used to be police barricades, and what we just learned from talking with the security guards here at the British High Commissioner's residence that around 10:30 p.m. yesterday night the barricades from in and around his residence was removed, and official confirmation from the MEA or the Delhi police and other security apparatus agencies is still awaited.
India did not officially comment on security issues of foreign missions, but New Delhi's anger at the repeated targeting of the Indian High Commission in London was made clear to the Rishi Sunak government. India's anger is not just restricted to the targeting of the High Commission premises, but also extended to targeting of Hindu temples and the failure of the British government to act. This is not the first time that the Indian High Commission has been targeted in the UK. In the past, pro-Pakistani activists have targeted the High Commission after the abrogation of Article 370 and also during the Citizenship Amendment Act protests. Bureau Report, India Today.
Let's try and make sense of these developments. Joining me on India First is Elizabeth Braw, a senior fellow at the Foreign and Defence Policy at the American Enterprise Institute, UK. Terry, Milski is author for Blood, 50 Years of Global Khalistan Project, joins us from Canada. And Sushant Sareen is Senior Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. Elizabeth, if I may come to you first. Multi-tiered security today after India's angry protests and scaling down of security at the British High Commission. Why didn't Britain act earlier?
Well, I think it's clearly a failure of policing, and we should remember that diplomatic security is not it's not directed by the government. It's directed by the Metropolitan Police acting on information from the intelligence agencies. So it's not as if the government decides, oh, this and that embassy needs protection and that embassy and the other one doesn't. It's based on the threat picture at any given moment. And clearly, in this case, the police got it wrong. And we should also remember that protection in front of embassies doesn't depend on geopolitical issues. It depends on terrorism and the terrorism threat faced by that country. So that's why, for example, Turkey has constant protection, Israel has constant protection, whereas India clearly doesn't have that. Now, I think that is going to be revised within the next few days, because this is not the only instance, as you already alluded to. It's not the only instance of these attacks in recent days.
Absolutely. Sushant Sareen, have the British actually seen the writing on the wall only today? Because clearly, vandalism and violence cannot be seen as freedom of expression in Britain, point one. And point two, the police failed to assess the situation correctly. Can that actually be true, given the fact that India had sensitized Britain about the threat, not just now, but on multiple occasions earlier?
Not only did India sensitize and inform the British authorities of the threat, there have actually been attacks on the Indian embassy in the past. So it's not as though this is the first time something like this is happening. And yet, if the British police or the British system, whatever their system is, I don't think that's anything to do with us. That's not important for us. That if the right hand of the British government does not know what the left hand is doing, that's their problem. As far as we are concerned, we are only interested in security of our mission and of our interests. And if the British are unable to protect it, then obviously certain consequences must be visited upon them. But, you know, Gaurav, I am convinced that this is not something as innocent as many people are making it out to be.
Okay.
There is a pattern of behavior on the part of the British. It has been there for many, many years. I'm even willing to go to the extent of saying that the British have been complicit in some of these attacks. They have deliberately turned a blind eye, and they have.
Sir, that's a grave charge.
They have allowed these attacks to take place without taking countermeasures. And God forbid, if some accident was to happen, because most of these guys are a bunch of thugs, right?
Yeah.
For all you know, somebody could be carrying a pistol, a bomb, a sword. And what if somebody was to get injured or somebody was to get killed?
One security official was injured. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. But let me take this to Canada. Let me take this to Terry Milski. So I hope I'm getting the pronunciation of your surname right, and my apologies if I've got it wrong. In your appreciation, is it vote bank politics that countries like Canada turn a blind eye to the activities of the Khalistanis? Sir, incidentally, despite the Kanishk bombing seen as the worst act of terror even in Canada.
Well, take that as an example. You know, we're hearing about the danger that this is much more serious in London, and why didn't the British police take it more seriously? Well, we've already been there in Canada. Remember back in the 80s at the time of the Air India bombing, as we call it, the Kanishka bombing of 1985, as you call it. At that time, the Indian consulate in Toronto was in fact invaded by rioters, Khalistani rioters, who fired a gun inside the consulate and then walked away unimpeded. No one was arrested. The consulate was attacked in Vancouver as well. The High Commission was attacked. It all happened before, and what happened? Something very similar to what we're seeing now. The host government, in this case Canada, said, well, you know, this is a inside India problem. It's an old story. It's not really our fight. We don't want to get into it. everybody calm down and it'll all go away. And of course it did not go away, it just got worse and worse, and it built up to the explosion on Air India's Flight 182, which killed 329 people, another bomb on another Air India plane that went off on the ground and killed a couple of Japanese baggage handlers. Total death toll, 331. So my point is that what we're seeing in London, it's easy to say, well, look, it's freedom of speech. You can't expect the London police to lock people up just for walking down the street carrying a flag and saying Khalistan Zindabad. We're not going to give up on freedom of speech. Agreed, I agree with that. But the problem is that if you don't take it more seriously and you don't prevent people, not arrest them afterwards, but you don't prevent people climbing up on the outside of the High Commission, tearing down the Indian flag, trying to put up a Khalistan flag, that crosses the line.
That crosses the line.
That should have been prevented, not action taken after the fact.
Absolutely,
and
what action anyways if that man is out on bail immediately? And Elizabeth, if I may, that's the point we are coming to. Why is England seen as a safe haven for criminals and terrorists in the name of freedom of expression or speech? Khalistanis are associated with the Air India bombing that killed, as Terry rightly pointed out, 329 people off the coast of Ireland, and the assassination of an Indian Prime Minister and a Chief Minister of a state. Indira Gandhi was assassinated by these Khalistani terrorists.
Well, I have to be honest, this is a problem that every liberal democracy struggles with. So every liberal democracy feels that it's moral obligation to receive people who could suffer persecution or otherwise
terrorists, liberal democracies
harmed in their home countries.
And
so they get asylum in these countries, and in some cases they turn out to be not particularly grateful guests, because they use that freedom of their new home country to stage various violent protests or commit violent acts. We have seen it, for example, in various European countries, and if I may highlight a recent example, in Sweden, people who were opposed to Sweden joining NATO have been staging deliberate provocations against Turkey, knowing.
But I'll come to Sweden in just a moment. I want to come to England. This is not liberal democracy, Sushant Sareen. This is actually shielding terrorists in the name of being a liberal democracy. This is much worse, Sushant Sareen.
Exactly, Gaurav. So you see, here is where the problem comes. You know, it's not just somebody staging a violent protest, okay? It's worse than that. Many of these guys are sitting out there in the safety which is provided to them by the Brits or the Canadians for that matter. And thank God you've got Terry on your show, because he's one of the best scholars on Khalistani terrorism. And
yes.
I would really counsel everybody who watches your program to read his book. It's an excellent book. But so many of these guys are sitting out there and actually planning terror attacks in India, number one. Number two, you know, if I was to take this argument of liberal democracy to the next level, so you know, people sitting out there plan and kill people in India. So how about Indian relatives or Indian friends of those people, incensed by that outrage, going and invading the UK High Commission or the Canadian High Commission, burning it down and saying that, well, just too bad, you know, it happened. Because it happens in Canada, it happens in the UK, it happens in the US or Australia, so it's happening in India. We are also a liberal democracy. We can't take any action against them. This is their right to free speech. This is their right to protest.
No, terrorism or violence or vandalism very clearly cannot be right to free speech. There is a line that has to be drawn. And Terry, you know, as Sushant Sareen was very rightly pointing out, you've studied this organization and these people very closely. So what is your understanding of the desecration, for example, of the Hindu temples in Canada or in England or in Australia, or the targeting of people of Indian origin in Surrey in Canada, or the attack on Indian missions both in the UK and the US?
Well, the first thing that has to be said is that I have yet to hear of any arrests. That's a problem. And this complacent attitude on the part of Western police forces can be always justified by, oh, well, we must respect freedom of speech. I respect freedom of speech, and I think I also have freedom of speech to condemn what I see. Let me give you a concrete example of where liberal democracy isn't really the issue. And you mentioned the Air India bombing, for example. Just 3 weeks before that bomb exploded on Flight 182, the police, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Toronto, received a telex from Air India headquarters and from the Indian government saying, look, we're getting threats, it's getting crazy out there, somebody's going to try to smuggle a bomb on a plane in a suitcase or something, and check baggage, hand baggage. We've got to have a complete crackdown on baggage security. And the police, what do? They said, we're always hearing this from the Indians. They're just trying to get extra security for free. We've heard it all a million times. And they shrugged and they filed the telex away. That telex was dated June 1st of 1985. Yes. The explosion happened on June 23rd. So there is you don't have to argue about what liberal democracy should or should not allow in terms of free speech. That's not a matter of free speech. That was a case of complacency. And this was after
negligence, or is there also complicity? Not in the case of Kanishk bombing, but at least in the case of the Indian High Commission. And I want to show these images of our tricolour flying so proudly at the India House today, because that's India sending out a message. And Elizabeth, once again, vandalism and violence cannot be seen as freedom of expression, even in the United Kingdom. Or is it worse, madam? Is this vote bank politics over security and even foreign relationships? This is vote bank politics because British political leaders want to be elected by an electorate that may comprise the Khalistanis.
No, I think that is definitely not the case. We should remember that this is also a very small fringe group in the UK that carries no electoral weight. I think it's just a matter of, and you may say well, so it's a matter of the police not taking the threat seriously enough. I wouldn't go so far as to suggest that in any way that this had a political motivation, because again, the policing or the security of embassies is not a political decision. It's a policing decision made by the Metropolitan Police. Okay. But I think there's one point that's really important to bear in mind, which is that these malcontents and people intent on destruction, they have an ultimate objective as well in many cases, and I think in this case as well, which is to drive a wedge between two countries, in this case India and the UK. And if India and the UK in this case end up drifting further apart as a result of these actions, it would be a terrible outcome, and it would give
the ball is in Britain's court. The ball is very clearly in Britain's court. Take action against these terrorists, and not just in Britain's court. The ball is in Canada's court, US, Australia, and whichever country you have these elements in these countries. Clearly, yes, freedom of speech is important, but there is a line that has to be drawn.
Also in India's court. The ball is also in India's court, though, isn't it? Here's what I mean.
Okay.
India has for years contented itself with berating the host governments who allow these terrible things to happen. Why don't you crack down? Why don't you lock them up? Well, as I said earlier, we're not going to abolish freedom of speech. But where is India in fighting the propaganda war, the information war that it's currently losing? Young men are being recruited by lies, outrageous lies about the Indian government, about living in India, what it's like. Young men in the diaspora, I mean,
yes.
And they're being educated, they're showing up for these rallies, they are in some cases getting violent, they are sneaking out at night with a spray can of paint to paint Khalistan Zindabad on top of Hindu temples, yep. in Australia, in Germany, in Canada, and elsewhere. Why is the Indian government so passive in launching some kind of counter-offensive?
That's a very good point you've made, sir, and I will let that be the last word on the show. I've sadly run out of time, but it was an absolute delight talking to you, Elizabeth, Sushant, Serene, and Terry in Canada. I hope to have a conversation with you once again in the days and weeks ahead. For joining me on India First.